And from the national headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez. Today, at exactly 8:42 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the world became a more dangerous place. At exactly that moment, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced that he is withdrawing the U.S. from its promise to not build more nuclear missiles. It was a promise that was made by Ronald Reagan in what many call the signature event of his foreign policy as president when he met with Mikhail Gorbachev in 1987. That is when the two historic leaders came together to sign the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Agreement, henceforth known as the INF Treaty. The U.S. says they are abandoning that deal because they don't trust the Russians, and they believe the Russians are cheating. The Russians, for their part, say they are not cheating and have invited the U.S. inspectors to the Russian Federation so they can see for themselves. This is a very important day. We have live team coverage of this seminal moment with reaction from both countries right here on the News with Rick Sanchez, where we do believe it is time to do news again. In the last week, we have seen our leaders once again threaten Iran. We have escalated the trade war with China for allegedly doing business with Iran. We have openly backed a coup in Venezuela. And right now, we are backing out of a nuclear treaty with Russia. Now, anyone would ask questions as they see these developments, right? They would wonder if it seems that the Cold War is somehow back on. But today's announcement of a pullout from the INF Treaty may be the most ominous sign of all, because what it does is it raises the specter of a possible new nuclear arms race. We are teaming up to bring you comprehensive coverage of this very important development. Sara Montes de Oca will be starting us off. We'll explain the significance of the INF Treaty. Dan Cohen is going to be joining us, who's been following this story here in the United States and from the White House. And then from Moscow, we're going to have the very latest from Dan Hawkins, who's going to be giving us the Russian response. We begin, though, with Sara to bring us up to date on both the history and the sense of the importance of this INF Treaty. Sara, get us started.
Rick, today, Washington pulled out of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces, also known as the INF, the treaty that was signed in 1987 by U.S. President Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev, the last Soviet leader in the final years of the Cold War. The INF Treaty has been the cornerstone of international security for quite some time now. It required both the U.S. and Russia to seize the development and deployment of all intermediate-range nuclear-launched ballistic and cruise missiles. More specifically, the agreement prohibits the U.S. and Russia from possessing, producing, or test flying a ground-launched cruise missile with a range of 310 to 3,420 miles, much like the ones you see right here behind me. Now, concern in Western and Central Europe over the growing nuclear arsenals of the U.S. and USSR was one of the key reasons for the treaty, a concern that to this day is still strongly voiced by the EU. The INF Treaty was the first arms deal to ban an entire class of nuclear weapons.
This agreement contains the most stringent verification regime in history, including provisions for inspection teams actually residing in each other's territory and several other forms of on-site inspection as well. This treaty protects the interests of America's friends and allies. It also embodies another important principle, the need for glasnost, a greater openness in military programs and forces.
History has charged the governments of our countries and the two of us, Mr. President, with a solemn duty to justify the hopes of Americans and Soviet people and of people the world over, to undo the logic of the arms race by working together in good faith.
Since taking office in 2017, the Trump administration has pulled the U.S. out of several multilateral treaties and deals, including the Paris Climate Accord, the Iran nuclear deal, UN Human Rights Council, UNESCO, NAFTA, TPP. But the INF is the most consequential diplomatic withdrawal to this day. Rick?
Thanks so much for that report, Sarah. Let's take you now to Dan Cohen. He's been gathering reaction all day long from our nation's capital, and he joins us now with the U.S. response. Dan, what you got?
Well, Rick, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has declared the United States will withdraw from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty as of February 2nd. He made the announcement at a State Department briefing Friday morning, some 60 days after President Trump announced his intentions to withdraw from the treaty.
We provided Russia an ample window of time to mend its ways and for Russia to honor its commitment. Tomorrow that time runs out. Russia has refused to take any steps to return real and verifiable compliance over these 60 days. The United States will therefore suspend its obligations under the INF Treaty effective February 2nd.
Now, Pompeo presented no evidence that Russia is violating the INF Treaty. Nonetheless, this move, which by all accounts raises the likelihood of nuclear conflict, has the full support of America's NATO allies.
All NATO allies support the U.S. decision today to start the withdrawal process, but it will take 6 months before that process is completed, and we continue therefore to call on Russia to come back into compliance and fully respect the INF Treaty.
Now, inside the U.S., there's been mixed reactions. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi said the Trump administration is risking an arms race and undermining international security and stability. She accused the Trump administration of discarding a key pillar of America's non-proliferation security framework and creating unacceptable risks. She called on the Trump administration to exhaust every diplomatic effort to avoid thrusting the United States into a dangerous arms competition. California Representative Ted Lieu echoed that sentiment, saying the withdrawal encourages an arms race. He proposed a bill that requires congressional approval before the president can order the launching of a nuclear strike. Now, Democrats from the House Armed Services Committee put out a statement on Twitter saying the withdrawal plays into Russian President Vladimir Putin's hands. Neoconservative Senator Tom Cotton said the withdrawal is a good first start. He said it must be backed by American firepower and called for expediting the development and deployment of a new generation of ground-launched missiles. So the reactions continue to roll out, but again, we haven't seen any evidence of Russia's non-compliance and minimal talk about the terrifying possibility of nuclear conflict. Back to you, Rick.
And as you would expect from us, thank you so much, Dan. Here at RT America, we want to make sure we're as comprehensive as we can possibly be. That's why we had Sara bringing you the latest on the story. We have reaction from Dan Cohen outside the White House. And now we're going to take you to Moscow, where Dan Hawkins is going to fill us in on what the response has been from Russia. Dan?
It does seem official as of today. The world has become that little bit more dangerous. The United States pulling out of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Agreement, citing violations by Moscow of that key treaty. Russia, of course, has repeatedly denied over the past several years these U.S. accusations of violating the terms of that treaty, of developing weapons and missiles that go over the range specified in that agreement. Indeed, the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov has gone so far as to say that the evidence presented by Washington of these violations by Russia was fabricated. Indeed, late in December last year, Russia held a public event to increase transparency surrounding this controversy, displaying the weaponry that has caused these disagreements. It's alleged that the United States representatives were invited to take part, to see this event, but chose not to attend. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that the U.S. withdrawal from this treaty holds wider ramifications for global security and global nuclear non-proliferation than simply U.S.-Russia relations.
After the US leaves the INF Treaty, the whole system of arms control and the stability of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty will be under threat.
Now, the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova went one step further. She stated that Russia reserved the right to take retaliatory measures and make a response to this US decision. She accused Washington of seeking to pull out of not only this agreement, but numerous international treaties and conventions.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.